All right. From New Era Field, I am Matt Parrino from NYUp.com and Syracuse.com. We are here to recap, discuss the Buffalo Bills' 14-13 win over the Detroit Lions, and I'm joined this week by a special guest from The Athletic, Tim Graham. He's going to join us to talk a little bit about this game. To start off with, though, as we usually do when we're talking about the Bills, Josh Allen. Some good moments, some bad moments, as I feel like his entire season has been.
Right.
What was your impressions from his performance today?
Pretty solid, and I was encouraged to see that he obviously has learned some things just from 7 days ago. When he refused to throw the ball away against the Jets, he ran a lot, which was exciting and good because it was pretty much the Bills' offense for a third straight week against the Jets. But he took a lot of extra hits. He fumbled. He threw interceptions rather than throw the ball into the sidelines or to take the sack. Rather than try to run and do too much. Well, he took a sack today. He threw the ball into the sideline. Now, he went back to, as a follower on Facebook wrote to me last week, I'm sick of watching hero ball, or sick of this hero ball, or however he phrased it. But hero ball is pretty much what Josh Allen tried to do last week, a one-man show. He did that late in the game. The interception was dropped. So it could have cost the Bills, but didn't. And in general, pretty solid. 204 yards passing, only 16 yards rushing, which is his first game to not have 99 or more. So yeah, I think it was a more of the quarterback that you expect to see, the in the pocket, big armed guy. He had a lot. His receivers didn't help him today. The officials didn't help him out too much either. There were some interferences that could have been called. His 50% passing, 13 to 26. So yeah, you want to see that get up around 60, of course, higher than 60. But these are things that will continue to improve, especially as the cast around him gets better. And they were playing shorthanded when the game began, and then faced some injuries as the game went on. So he was out there pretty much as the offense again. Hooked up with Robert Foster, some encouraging things out there. The defense held up. I think, by and large, a pretty good performance.
So we just emerged from the Buffalo Bills locker room, spoke with some guys, and I thought it was interesting talking to some defensive players, Lorenzo Alexander, Micah Hyde, about how this is a process. And I know it's the cliche and it's what this team kind of bangs its drum on, but it is something that, harping at the beginning of the season about how this was such a weakness for the Bills, this wide receiver group, and, early on, it looked like that. But as the season has gone along, and especially since Allen returned, I feel like you're starting to see a lot of these guys turn the page. You mentioned some drops today, which was the case, but I also thought that when they needed it most, you have a guy like Robert Foster step up and make a play. You have an Isaiah McKenzie early in the game before the injury with some consistency in the short to intermediate passing game, which was an issue going into the year.
Yeah, and where do you get your easy completions, your easiest completions for any quarterback in the NFL? They come from your slot receiver, they come from your running backs, they come from your tight ends. Well, name those guys for the Bills. So, the tight end, when Kroom caught the late pass, it was almost like, oh, there are tight ends on this team. Like Charles Clay had one target. Kroom had one target for 25 yards. It was a big play, but that's 2 targets to your tight ends. Keith Ford had 1 target. That's it for the running backs. So that's a total of 3 targets for your tight ends and your running backs. So that's going to hurt Josh Allen's completion percentage for sure. So you look at that number of 13 for 26 and say that's got to be higher. Well, he doesn't have the complement of guys to throw the ball to. He's not dumping it off to Alvin Kamara. Well, I know that I'm using a big name there, but even like on the other side of the field today, Theo Riddick, like a guy that you can just dump the ball to. It doesn't have to be an all-pro, but just somebody to be that outlet receiver. And with LaShawn McCoy out of the lineup, with Ford getting hurt, with Marcus Murphy getting hurt, he didn't have that. So the Bills will have that. You'd have to assume, as they have this $82 million or $90 million, depending on where the salary cap is, to spend in the offseason, through the draft, all these things. So I looked at it at the end of last week's game against the Jets. The 11 offensive players that were on the field averaged 26 NFL starts, less than 2 seasons worth. And this is with the game on the line. Josh Allen against the Jets had to have a touchdown to win the game. 26 NFL starts. That included Charles Clay, who's boosts that average pretty high. And the skill position guys were down to 22 starts in the NFL, and they got less experienced as the game wore on because of all these injuries. So he is a one-man guy out there, one-man band out there, and I think that's actually going to be good for his development.
For sure. And you talk about the running back position, which I think is something interesting, not from this game per se, but looking into the future. We put up a story on nyup.com this week about should the Bills bring back LaShawn McCoy, and there was a couple arguments on both sides of the debate. But I think that one thing that interests me most is something you mentioned in what you were just talking about, is that I think that the LaShawn McCoy you think you're getting, if he is that guy, could be a serious weapon for Josh Allen and Brian Dable, who, by the way, in his first year in Buffalo is slowly starting to demonstrate himself as a very consistent offensive coordinator with the way that he's drawing these things up for a very young and inexperienced
He's
team.
generating yardage and getting wins, scratching out wins with this lineup that we were just talking about. And we're talking about the skill positions mostly, but you take a look at the offensive line. How many high draft picks do you have on the offensive line? I think there's a second rounder in there.
Right.
There's a third and a couple of fourths and an undrafted guy, and guys who are on their second and third team. This is the entire offense. It can be improved at any position, and you're not going to go out and get another quarterback, of course, but Josh Allen will improve as everybody else improves around him.
So McCoy, I really want to talk about this going forward with you while I have you here on this one. We're talking about a guy who's in it could be the end of the worst season of his career, averaging 3.3 yards a carry. Hasn't looked like the same guy for the most part, but again, you bring up this offensive line is bad, and Ford and Murphy, both kind of energetic littler backs that could kind of have some have a skill set to make some moves on players a la LaShawn McCoy. Yeah. They couldn't do anything against the Detroit defense, especially that front four that's banged up quite a bit. So it seems to be that this offensive line is the bigger problem. So do you think McCoy still could be at least some version of the McCoy we know going into 2019?
Yes, I think so, but not on this team as it is right now. They're going to need help on the offensive line. He's a home run hitter, and it's something where when he gets the ball, he's looking to gain 14, 20 yards. He's not looking for the 3 yards like Chris Ivory is. Hit the hole. Chris Ivory's average is going to look good because he's not going to get tackled for 2-yard losses like LaShawn McCoy does. Chris Ivory is going to occasionally get the 7 and 8 yard run, whereas LaShawn McCoy, he might be -2, -1, +2, 17, 23, 2, 3, like that. But he's unable to do it with this offensive line as it is right now, and I think that he's unable to change that style because it's so instinctive to him. That's the way he runs, and two guys here who know about the pugilistic arts. It's like the slick fighter who, like Muhammad Ali, he was able to change his fighting style. He was slick. You couldn't hit him. And then as he got older, he was forced to take punishment, to give punishment. A guy like Roy Jones, who didn't change his style and was taking punishment because he thought he could get out of the way of that punch, and all of a sudden it was just a fraction of a second enough to not be able to get out of the way, and was getting beat easily in his career, late in his career. He's going to have to find a way to either change his style, or they're going to have to get the type of blockers that open up big holes for him. Because if defensive players are getting into infiltrating the backfield like they are, he takes a shift or he takes a cut, and there's just another two. He's swarmed under, and but he still does have enough speed, and he's good in space. He's good as a receiver, so I do think he has value. He also has value in a recruiting aspect. If you're going to be looking to spend all these millions of dollars that the Bills have, you need to be able to sell this team to a receiver. Let's say there's a slot guy out there you want to get, or a #1 caliber receiver. They want to at least be able to say, hey, look, we have LaShawn McCoy here. We have this young quarterback with this big arm. Or if you're a left tackle, you're a big a center with some leadership abilities, who can come in and anchor the offensive line. You say, hey, you could come in here and block for a potential future Hall of Famer. You have this young quarterback. Without LaShawn McCoy on the team, it's a little tougher to sell the Bills, I think, and to free agents. So him being around, I think, helps, and that's an ancillary benefit. But I do think that he's worth keeping around. Had they traded him at the deadline, I would not have argued with that either. But I do think that keeping him around is not a mistake.
So you take a look at this offense and this wide receiver group, especially the three top targets on the day, Zay Jones, Isaiah McKenzie, Robert Foster, building some chemistry with Josh Allen, starting to kind of come into their own as a young unit. On the other side of with that kind of confidence that they're building amongst their group and, from their teammates in them, I think that you kind of look on the other side of the ball, especially early in the draft. We could be talking about potentially the Bills going defense at the top of that draft, which is where it's more, where it's stronger, and cornerback is one of the things that, people have talked about, potentially Greedy Williams, there's a couple other options, but I want to talk about from this game on that, Tre'Davious White. He's been kind of slumping. I think it's safe to say. Tough game last week, gave up that big catch to Robbie Anderson. I feel like anytime you say something about Tre'Davious White, most weeks, which I experienced earlier this season, it doesn't go over well amongst Bills fans. But, the reason I said that is because you go back to last season against A.J. Green, where he struggled. You go to DeAndre Hopkins on those first couple of drives where he struggled. Now you look against these bigger physical wide receivers, he seems to struggle. So my question is he that lockdown cornerback that the reputation kind of indicates?
Not yet. I think he is, and I think that Bills fans are rightfully excited about Tre'Davious White because he is a draft pick that hit. Like, he's a guy that is a successful draft pick. He was drafted to be that cover corner, and he does it mostly well. He's still young. He's going to get better. I will say that, and this is just maybe anecdotal, but I'd like to see him be a little bit more of a leader after games. And a lot of people out there, and I know this is dangerous territory to get into when you start talking about the media, because I think most fans don't feel like the media is owed anything. And I don't think we're owed anything either. But this is the second week in a row that Tre'Davious White has left the locker room before it was open to reporters, meaning he's slipping out. And and you want your leaders to be in there and be the voice of the team. And yes, everybody wants to hear from Lorenzo Alexander and Kyle Williams are always the last ones to leave the locker room. Jerry Hughes is usually among the last to leave the locker room. Tre'Davious White being known as the guy who's going to slip out and not answer the questions and leave his teammates to answer the questions. And granted, today was a win, but he wasn't there to answer the questions about what happened late in the game that allowed the Jets to win it. I'd like to see Tre'Davious White be a little bit more of a leader in terms of being a voice of that team and a voice in that locker room. Again, I'm not owed anything. My feelings aren't hurt that Tre'Davious White doesn't talk to me. That's fine, but I think it stands for something among the other guys in the locker room, his teammates, to be in there and answering the questions and again, like I said, to be a spokesman for these guys. I think that's part of the leadership. That's why Josh Allen, after every game, is at a lectern in a suit. And in fact, he'll do this, I noticed. I don't know if you noticed this in Miami. I never mentioned it. I was going to put it in my story. I never did. Josh Allen, after that game, heartbroken. Like, the guy was devastated to the point where Brandon Beane had to come up and talk to the guy. Like, it looked like he was, athletes take losses hard, some harder than others. But this was like, it's about as hard as I've seen a guy take a loss. A week, just a regular season game. He put on a suit after the game, no tie, but he had a suit coat, and a button-down shirt, and he got up there at the lectern and he spoke in his suit. And when the press conference was over, he went back to his locker stall and changed out of his suit and got into his sweatpants and his stuff for the plane ride home. He packed a suit just for the purpose of his press conference, because he's there and he's the leader, he's the boss of that offense, and he's one of the bosses on this team. And to see him take that attitude, I don't know who told him to do that, if it was an agent or another player or something, but he did not get behind that lectern with his travel clothes on. He put on a suit just for that 7 minutes that he was going to talk to the reporters, and then he took it off. And I think that that's one of those things, like those little things that you look at of when you try to figure out if a guy's going to be a leader or not, or is willing to take it on. Those are the types of things you look for.
And when you talk about Josh Allen,
those are the types of things you notice. I don't want to say those are the types of things you look for, because I'm not looking at, say, all right, who's got a suit on, who doesn't. I just noticed that. That to me was like, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, to jump on that though, with Josh, it's interesting because what I've noticed about him is he's very the highs are high and the lows are low with him.
Yeah, well,
so
sure. He rides the emotion.
Exactly. After that touchdown today, you saw him get right in the thick of it. I mean, most of the time you don't see your quarterback out in front with all the guys in the front with the beers in their hands and they're celebrating together and he's roaring, and that's usually more of like a linebacker or something. He
did it after the 1 yard gain to get the first down
yes.
to seal the game. He
yes.
turned around to the fans and he was going like this, or not money. That's Manziel. He was like doing bring it. Let's hear it.
Right.
Yeah, let's not compare him to Johnny Manziel.
Yeah.
He was getting a lot of that going into the draft, though, wasn't he?
Right.
Like, oh, this guy's just another Johnny Manziel.
Right.
I don't want him on my team. Well, he's brought a hell of a lot more to the table than Johnny Manziel has.
And the reason I want to bring that up is because you look at the national narrative this week, and it's something that I was moving this week actually into my new house in Buffalo.
Congratulations! I saw that on Facebook.
I'm very excited. I'm officially back in Buffalo, so it's an exciting time.
Your wife, I saw you posted. You shared your wife's post.
Yes.
If it was you that had posted it, I was gonna say so because I haven't met your wife.
Right.
But I was gonna say, how did you pull this off? I mean, you're like
the move.
Yeah. Well, no, just the idea. Like, here's Matt Parrino, but he's got a house. He's got this beautiful family. I'm like, I know this guy. I'm like, how'd you pull this off?
That's a great question. Most people ask, and I still think to this day, how did I trick this whole situation?
Yeah. How did this happen?
But we don't talk about that, Tim, because you don't chance things like that. Okay.
And I didn't want your wife to be like, who's this a-hole? But if it was you that had posted it, I would have said something.
Okay, I got you. But back to Josh Allen. The thing that's interesting about this, you look at some of the national narrative, and I bring up Bill Barnwell just because it was his article, but it's across the board nationally. Like the talk shows, it's almost like there's this perception that Josh Allen is already this bust. You know what I mean? That it's like the passing numbers aren't there, but for two guys that watch this every week and watch him every week and see the things that people don't see in the locker room. If we're talking to Bills fans right now and talking to them about their guy going into the future, there's a lot to like, even with the drops, even with maybe the completion percentage that's a little bit lower. There's still a lot to like about this kid.
I mentioned it last week on Channel 4. Is that I think that this is his floor. What we're seeing. Mm-hmm. I mean, if he's coming into the NFL and doing this in his 7th, 8th, 9th start with this cast of characters around him, then who's to say that he's ever going to be below this? Mm-hmm. Like, how could it be? Like, is he going to have a debilitating injury crop up, or he's going to get in a car accident and get his leg mangled? I mean, that's about the only thing. I mean, what we've seen out here should be the base. Mm-hmm. This is the foundation. So it can only get better from here, and what we're seeing now is pretty darn exciting.
For sure.
And it's good enough to win NFL games, not against the elite competition yet, but to beat Detroit came into today's game with 5 wins. They've beaten 5 NFL teams. They couldn't beat the Bills today. Should have beat the Dolphins. They're in the hunt for a playoff spot. Probably should have beat the Jets.
Beat the Texans.
They probably,
if he doesn't get hurt.
They should be on a 4-game winning streak. Mm-hmm. Probably. I mean, yeah, play or two. It's not to say that they got cheated out of the Jets or the Dolphins' losses, mm-hmm. but he threw a catchable ball to Charles Clay that was dropped. It could have been a win, if not for a blown coverage or a bad coverage late in the game against the Jets. Or the special teams. I'll blame the special teams way before I blame Tre'Davious White for that loss to the Jets.
For sure.
You probably should be looking at 4 straight wins since Josh Allen came back, and I think it's everything's been encouraging. And you're right. There are a lot of people out there, I think, who are are so invested in him being a bust, because that's the problem you get into with people who have a really strong opinions before the draft even begins as to whether or not somebody is or is not going to be a good NFL player. Mm-hmm. So much weighs on what the team is, what all the different variables, who the position coach is going to be, who the teammates are going to be, what if you're going to a team that is close to the playoffs or nowhere near the playoffs, if you're going to a perennial winner or not. I mean, but people they tag a guy as good enough, not good enough, and I think that there were so many people who tagged Josh Allen as not good enough that now they are picking apart all of the undesirable things like completion percentage. He's running for a lot of yards, and people will turn that into a negative. He runs too much.
Right.
Well, yeah, probably, but he can run. Is what he's showing you is that he can win you a game with his legs. But yeah, you don't want that on. You don't want him to run for 400 yards over a 3-week stretch, but. Right. People are turning negative. He throws the ball too hard. His receivers can't catch it. Well, no. Get him some confident NFL receivers with bigger catch radiuses who can catch the ball when they dive. So yeah, his throws aren't precision. They're not on the money to the guy in stride. But you know what? Drew Brees doesn't always throw it that way too. Right. But he's got receivers who can catch the ball while toeing the line. Who have catch radius up here, down here, down. You know, the Bills receivers aren't that complete.
Right.
And if Brandon Beane is able to get a couple of more receivers who can do that, then I think you see his completion percentage go way up.
Mm-hmm. And you went out and spent some time with him and some people around him
out in the cotton fields.
Yes, and I think this is something that I maintain now. I jumped on the beat like a little bit after that period where he got drafted, and so I wasn't as close to it. But you look at some of the film, you look at him, you know, just from his early days, the first press conferences. And what he was dealing with at the college level, the competition, the level of his teammates, and then jumping into this NFL world, it's such an overwhelming thing that what you said earlier is perfect. We haven't seen even, you know, the slightest level of where he's going to be at long term, I don't think, just because of how big of a jump it was.
We don't, I'm not going to call him a perennial All-Pro or even a Pro Bowler, which seems like a third of the NFL quarterbacks make the Pro Bowl every year now that the Super Bowl teams don't make them. You know, they got the alternates and injury guys who pull out with the fake injuries because they don't want to go to Orlando.
Right.
It's not the same as Honolulu. So I'm not even going to say he's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler, but to write him off at this stage, I think is folly. You can't. There's nothing that we have seen out here that says this is a flaw that is going to really hurt this guy down. There's no way to come back from this. And even you can argue that accuracy is the hardest thing to coach into a quarterback, and I agree with that. But also, the accuracy will stay the same, but his completion percentage is going to go up with better players around him. And they are playing right now with an offense that is like AAA. You know, it is like a pretty, they're good. They're NFL players, but he's throwing to a lot of guys who were on practice squads earlier this year, who weren't drafted. Robert Foster wasn't drafted. Marcus Murphy's out there playing running back, and then Keith Ford's out there, and the linemen that he's playing with. I mean, some of these guys are, you know, cast-offs, and you know, Kroom. I mean, he's nobody's. You know, he was no blue chip. He was no blue chipper, and the two guys with any pedigree on this offense. Well, three if you want to count Kelvin Benjamin before the trade. Kelvin Benjamin wasn't producing, Charles Clay wasn't producing, and LaShawn McCoy hasn't been producing. And so he's getting the most, and Brian Dable deserves a lot of credit, getting the most out of these guys, these random guys. And I'm excited to see what he's going to do with non-random guys.
Right. 2 games left. New England Patriots next week on the road. You'll be there?
I won't be.
You won't be?
No, it's 2 days before Christmas.
You're right.
I don't have to be there, and so I'm going to be doing some other things.
Good.
Selfish. Do some family stuff.
Do some family stuff. At nyup.com, we'll have you covered. Buffalo Bills coverage from New England next week, and then back here for Miami Dolphins to finish it out. And for all of your higher end coverage, I feel like you're the creme de la creme of the Buffalo media scene. You know, I look up to you a lot. And
no sarcasm in there at all.
None. I mean, you do some really great stuff. Along with, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Matthew Fairburn, who is my predecessor at nyup.com. He's the Bills beat writer over there. Make sure you guys catch up all of their coverage.
Thank you.
It's top notch.
Thank you. Thank you for sending people there. We're proud of it. We enjoy it. Matt Fairburn's the beat writer on the Bills. I do more of the analysis type stuff. Don't write quite as often as Matt does, but yeah, I think we have something there to offer.
You do.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's fun. And you can also hear him on the radio if you're in Buffalo. 1270 The Fan.
1270 The Fan, or, you know, it's on iTunes. The Tim Graham Show is on iTunes. It's on SoundCloud. You can check it anywhere. Syracuse, Rochester, wherever you are, it's on the radio.
And it's
on the computer, I should say. If it's through your headset.
Yeah, and it's brought to you by Viola Cummings and Lindsley.
That's right.
Your personal injury.
Oh shoot, you're gonna make me see.
What is it? I'm a loyal listener, and I have it committed to memory.
Gosh, let's see if I can remember it.
Works.
I do have it in front of me because I don't want to mess it up. So let's see the Tim Graham Show and see if I can get into the row. The Tim Graham Show is brought to you by Viola Cummings and Lindsay, your workers' compensation and personal injury attorneys. Call in the phone number or visit them at violacummingslindsay.com.
There you go.
The phone number. I should have it memorized by now. I'm bad with that.
I'm very disappointed.
I don't even know my wife's phone number.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next week.